Plus rationnel, Feola, l'entraîneur de l'équipe, a décidé de lancer dans le grand bain Garrincha.
It was against Bulgaria in a friendly match ahead of the 1958 World Cup that Brazil manager Vicente Feola decided to try two of its secret armors, Edson Arantes do Nascimento aka Pele and Manuel Francisco dos Santos aka Garrincha. Brazil comfortably won the match 3-1 as both of them had played well, but more significantly, this started a partnership which enabled Brazil to never lose a match when this duo played together. Let's come back to 1969 when Pele achieved a rare feat in front of a jam-packed crowd in Maracana. He had found the back of the net for the 1000th time in his career. Amidst the chants and applause from the crowd, he took the mic and decided this movement to a noble cause. He urged his fellow countrymen to protect the Brazilian children. Garrincha was not at the stadium. He was not even aware of which team Pele was playing for. He knew it later in his radio. This shows the stark difference in fate of probably two of the greatest Brazilian footballers ever, only 11 years after they started their career together on a bright afternoon in Sweden. While Pele became an establishment, probably the symbol of achievement in the beautiful game, Garrincha found himself slowly fading away from the footballing folklore. Much has been said. Numerous articles have been published over the years discussing the notorious post-playing days of players like Gascoigne, Best and Garrincha. Stories about their drinking habits and womanizing are plentiful due to the public's interest. But what these stories sometimes do is to shift our attention completely from the fact that all these guys were geniuses in their heyday. When Manuel Francisco dos Santos was born in 1933 in an improvised family in Pau Grande, a factory town in north of Rio, everyone including the midwife and the family members were as surprised as anybody who would later watch him play in the years to come because the newborn had three defects: a deformed spine, right leg was bent inwards and left leg 6 cm shorter and curving outwards. Although it could have been diagnosed earlier, in a poverty-stricken family in an undeveloped region, priorities were different. Growing up as a kid, his small physique among his playmates prompted his sister Rosa to name him Garrincha, northeastern Brazilian word for rain. Carefree since childhood, Garrincha left schooling at the age of 14 to take up a job in a factory in Pau Grande, but showed little responsibility. More often than not, he was found absent, playing football in the roads or in the fields, resulting in him getting expelled a couple of times. But every time he was reinstated only because of his sheer talent with the ball playing for the factory team. Slowly, his talent started catching everyone's attention and many advised him to choose professional football. But this was Garrincha, a boy whose interests were vested solely on fishing and kick about with his mates in the streets. He did not even have a clue about professional football until he started playing in it. Vasco da Gama once expelled him for his tryouts because he did not bring his boots. Another time he left Corinthians trial to catch up the last train to Pau Grande. Football for Garrincha was not to be taken seriously. It was to be played with fun. That's why when the whole nation was mourning after the devastating loss to Uruguay in 1950, Garrincha, being very much astonished, went fishing. Finally in 1953, the door of professional football opened for him when Botafogo right back Arate Viana, who had watched Garrincha play, literally dragged him to the trial. In the second day, Garrincha had to face Nilton Santos, an already established right back for the Brazilian national team. Garrincha did to him what would be a trademark move in his career. Taking up the ball in his feet, he put it right between the onrushing defender's leg and dribbled him past easily. Botafogo did not hesitate and immediately offered him a blank contract. Finally, at the age of 20, Garrincha became a professional footballer. He had already become a father by then. He started off well, scoring 5 goals in his first 4 matches for the club. Few more goals in 1954 really created a possibility of him joining the Brazil squad for the 1954 World Cup. But the coach decided to go with an experienced pair of Julinho and Joel as wingers. The chance finally came in 1958 FIFA World Cup held in Sweden. Brazil at that point was already feeling the heat of expectations, so they left no stone unturned in their preparation for the tournament. All the female staffs in the team hotel were replaced with their male counterparts. A psychologist were hired to look after the mental well-being of the players. It was during such a psychological test, the result came as a real surprise as it revealed that Garrincha's IQ was lower than a truck driver and his aggression level was 0. Little did they knew that those are retarded ones who would try to judge him on a paper rather than watching him play. Both Pele and Garrincha did not play in their first 2 group league matches. For Pele, the citation was that him being a teenager, an early injury from rough challenges by European teams could have been a real possibility. But for the latter, it was more serious. Ahead of the World Cup, Brazil played a couple of friendly matches in Europe for preparation. It was in the last match of the tour against Italian club Fiorentina. Garrincha dribbled past 3 opponent defenders, including the goalkeeper, and then, despite having an open goal in front, waited for the onrushing defender Robotti to arrive and dribbled him again to tap the ball finally into the back of the net. Daring it may seem, but the carefreeness made the whole squad so angry that they started abusing him straight from the bench. Nevertheless, Brazil started comfortably winning their first match against Sweden and holding England to a 0-0 draw in the second. They had to face USSR in the third match. Secret reports about the Soviet players' fitness and stamina made Brazil think tank to go for an early advantage in the opening half of the game. That's why Pele and Garrincha were included in the team for the first time in the World Cup. And what a start it was! Almost from the free kick, Garrincha dribbled past 3 defenders to take a shot which rebounded by the post. Pele hit the woodwork once again from his pass before a minute could even complete. Their opening onslaught finally bore fruit when Vava scored at the 3-minute mark. 3 minutes, which is still considered to be the best 3 minutes by a Brazil team in the World Cup. Brazil won the match 2-0 and did not look back. They thrashed France and Sweden 5-2 in semi-final and the final respectively. Vava won the Golden Boot and Garrincha got a place in the team of the tournament for providing 2 assists in the final. The Canarina domination on the world stage started. Garrincha was enjoying a fairly successful period after that, but his drinking habit increased rapidly. In this regard, he was a match for his father, who also had that flamboyant attitude and was a charm among the ladies. Success was catching him slowly, and with the carefree nature, it became deadlier. After the World Cup, he got into a car accident where he ran over his father, and when an angry mob stopped him after a frightened chase, they discovered him completely befuddled, having no clue that it was his father. More often than not, he missed trainings, and womanizing increased. His club knew everything, but turned a deaf ear because the player was filling their coffers through tour matches, where people came in numbers to watch Garrincha play. For the 1962 World Cup, Brazil took almost the same team that had won the previous World Cup. Garrincha, after winning his second Rio State Championship, started in a good mood. But the problem arrived in the second match when Pele, after playing almost 75 matches and scoring 115 goals for his club Santos, felt discomfort in his hamstring and missed the entire tournament. Brazil needed someone to take up the scoring button, so Garrincha stepped up. How often do we watch Maradona, Pele, Cruyff, Zidane, Messi in the World Cup stage and forget that football is a team game? It's not that they did not have world-class teammates or had to move mountains to win that trophy, it's their sheer genius to take matters into their own hands and provide that extra little magic which in mortal eyes seemed impossible. Take Maradona for example.
Si es el mundial de Maradona, será el mundial de la selección.
Despite having Jorge Valdano, Jorge Buruchaga beside him, can anyone disagree that it was his artistry combined with great panners that drew the silver lining in 1986? Garrincha, with all his playful nature, provided almost that same impact, if not better yet, in the event in Chile where football took a backseat as the dirty side took control over. First, he provided an important assist to Amarildo in a do-or-die match against Spain, then against England and Chile in the quarter-final and semi-final. Garrincha scored 4 goals. Although he did not find the back of the net in the final, that did not stop Brazil from winning back-to-back World Cups. Garrincha, with his mesmerizing performance, won both the Golden Ball and the Golden Boot. He also made famous samba singer Elza Soares during the celebrations. The duo continued to live together for 15 years. Botafogo, led by Garrincha, won another state championship in 1962. It seemed that Garrincha had finally found his fortune both on and off the field. But soon, the injury took control over. The bent legs, which still at that point of time was his armor, started bloating with fluids after every match. Doctors had previously advised him to operate, but both his club and his faith healer told him that once he goes under the scissor, his football career would end. The situation then turned so worse that Garrincha could not even play 2 consecutive games. Finally, in 1964, he decided to operate. But he was not the same player again. His relationship with Botafogo was deteriorating due to some contractual obligations. As said earlier, Botafogo took advantage of Garrincha's financial naivety and asked him to sign blank contracts. Later, they would put as low an amount as possible on it. When Garrincha retaliated, fans turned against him, saying money had gotten into his head. His private life with Elza was also becoming the subject of media and public criticism, as in the traditional Brazilian societies, Elza was portrayed as marriage wrecker. Their home in Rio was attacked several times. Finally, in 1965, Garrincha, after playing 579 games and scoring 215 goals over 12 years, decided to move to Sao Paulo to play for Corinthians. Then came the 1966 World Cup. Garrincha was just a mere shadow of his previous self, but still, he was selected because of his heroics 4 years earlier. The whole Brazil squad was aging. Despite that, they won their first game against Mexico. Pele and Garrincha played together for the last time. They lost the next 2, resulting in a shock exit from the first round. Garrincha, after returning from the World Cup, was visiting Pau Grande with Elza's mother. That's when their car crashed and her mother died. Garrincha went into a heavy depression and tried to take his life. It was finally in 1970 that Garrincha decided to hang his boots because he became a grandfather. His testimonial was arranged in 1973 when, in the first half in a game between Brazil vs World 11, the referee stopped the game as the crowd said goodbye to their adored angel, who, with all his adversities, truly became a symbol for the ordinary Brazilians. Money was drying up, and life in Brazil was getting miserable. So they decided to move to Rome to start something new. Elza found work as a singer in bars, but Garrincha could not do anything apart from a few gigs with local amateur sides. Too ashamed to ask for cigarettes from people, he used to collect cigarette butts from the street. Although he got a job for a while, being Brazilian coffee ambassador in European trade fairs, but could not hold onto it only because of his nonchalant nature. After an unsuccessful 2 years, they came back. In the meantime, the couple had a baby, which many thought would bind them together. But what happened was completely opposite. Garrincha started beating Elsa, which prompted her to think about their child's safety. Finally, in 1976, after living 15 years together, Elsa left him. Finding himself alone in his life, Garrincha tried another few unsuccessful suicide attempts. His drinking was increased to a point that very often he was found asleep with a half-burnt cigarette in his hand. Upon waking up, the first thing he did was to drink again. Finding himself penniless, he requested the Brazilian Football Federation to give him a loan to buy a house. He went missing after getting denied. Later that evening, he was found drunk, crying in front of a church in Rio's city center. A charitable organization and a widow of an ex-Botafogo player came to his rescue, even when his daughters from the first marriage had abandoned him. In the morning of 1983, he was admitted to a hospital after getting into an alcoholic coma. He breathed his last later that evening. The same fire engine which rallied them into the crowd after the 1958 World Cup triumph took his body to Praia Grande for last rites. Thousands of people gathered by the roadside to watch him for one last time. Amidst heavy raining, a banner saying, "Garrincha, you made the world smile, now you made it cry," was spotted. Almost 8,000 people were waiting in the cemetery since morning, little more than what it could cater for. When they left, the facility was half destroyed. Till this day, many in Brazil who have watched him play, or many who did not, regard Garrincha as the best Brazilian footballer of all time. Not just because of his ability, which is still a surprise, looking at his physique, nobody could even imagine him walking up straight, let alone being the nimble athlete he was, but because of his free spirit, his electric persona, his untoward life in which he once found the world at his disposal, only to plunge back into the deep tunnel of misfortune in another. In his 49 years of life, being exploited by the game itself, he quite unknowingly had symbolized the common people of Brazil, who were also exploited. That's why his epitaph reads, "Here rests in peace the one who was the joy of the people, Mane Garrincha."